A sudden doomsday-level comet shower destroyed everything on the surface of the Earth. Huge tsunamis and radiation storms raged. Human society regressed to the primitive age overnight. Survivors flocked to the long dry English Channel for a glimmer of hope, only to find a single rope bridge strung across the towering cliff. Luckily, a few people risked their lives to cross it, but the pitch-black scorched earth in front of them plunged them into despair in an instant. The fabled Pure Land everyone had been searching for so hard seemed to be nothing but an empty myth. At first, people thought the comet's pass by the Earth was just an astronomical wonder, but the largest fragment of the comet hit the Earth, triggering a global disaster and drastic changes to the surface environment. 75% of the world's population perished. John's family and other survivors took refuge in an underground bunker. A year later, the Earth's surface began to recover. Survivors walked out of the bunker and began to face the post-disaster world together. But the crisis was far from over. Fragments of the comet Clark lingered in Earth's orbit and struck the planet at irregular intervals. What's more, the radiation from the meteorites kept endangering human survival. Survivors were completely unable to rebuild civilization and could only huddle in the bunker, clinging to life. One day, John was ordered to go out to search for supplies. As far as the eye could see, the ground was nothing but a wasteland. Worse still, a new crack had appeared in the crater near the bunker, and it was showing signs of further expansion. Luckily, several abandoned lifeboats and a destroyer had drifted to the seaside. John immediately began to search the lifeboats but found nothing. He had to take the risk of boarding the destroyer to search for supplies. Though he found no food, he came across a lot of tools. Just then, the wireless receiver suddenly gave an alarm. A pressure storm was fast approaching him. John immediately grabbed the scavenged supplies. As soon as he left the destroyer and returned to the coast, he saw dark clouds wrapped in thunder and lightning charging towards him at high speed. John ran towards the bunker at the fastest speed he could muster. In the split second before the storm was about to engulf him, he summoned all his strength to climb over the blast door and narrowly escaped death. After a minute of disinfection, John was finally truly out of danger. At this point, in the conference room, the military was holding an emergency meeting. The Federal Emergency Management Agency had originally built the bunker for a planned 2-year use, but they had been using it for 5 years now. Now various supplies in the bunker were on the verge of exhaustion, and it might collapse completely at any time. The senior management planned to consolidate resources for another year, hoping that the surface environment might improve by then, but most of the senior management were pessimistic about it. Now Canada and most parts of the US were gone. Iceland had also been submerged by seawater. The only hope was Europe, but the most critical problem was radiation. Even the smallest amount of radiation could kill a person. Just then, a senior executive stood up and told everyone she and her colleagues had discovered through research that the shape and scale of a certain volcanic crater could block the formation of radioactive storms. This characteristic, combined with the depth of the volcano, made this place a natural safe zone.
Even if it was real, it's in southern France. How exactly are we going to get there?
The general added that Europe was now rife with rebellions and civil wars. Even if they made it to France against all odds, they might be killed by the rebels. Just as the senior management were arguing endlessly, the bunker suddenly shook violently, and this wasn't the first time. Because the comet's impact on the Earth had affected the tectonic plates, causing them to move frequently, the bunker was also affected. Luckily, the bunker could still hold on for now. The senior management resumed the meeting. John's wife, Allison, brought up that the bunker had received a distress signal from the outside a few days ago, and hoped the senior management would agree to take in these refugees. Seeing there were voices of opposition, Allison proposed a show of hands, and the people in the bunker had survived until now, precisely because of the concept of mutual help. So everyone agreed to Allison's proposal one after another. At this point, John walked into the leader's office. 5 years of bunker life had made him calm and pragmatic. Now John relied on his engineering skills to repair all kinds of equipment in the bunker in exchange for additional resource quotas. With the tools he had brought back from the destroyer, John and his friend repaired the water supply system, which filled them with a great sense of accomplishment. During the meal, John handed Allison a flower specimen, which he had found on the destroyer. Although Allison was overjoyed, she felt angry at the thought of their son Nathan's behavior. Nathan was 15 years old this year. Having been confined to the bunker and deprived of sunlight for years, he was filled with yearning for the outside world. Yesterday, he had sneaked out of the bunker while everyone wasn't looking. Luckily, the guards found Nathan in time and nothing bad happened. John had chewed his son out after learning about it, but Nathan had shrugged it off. made a random excuse and left indifferently. Early the next morning, 2 soldiers successfully picked up the refugees. Upon learning this, the senior management immediately told the guards to open the west gate and ordered the decontamination team to get ready for disinfection. At the same time, John started his work for the day, but just then, a colleague was shocked to find that the wall had actually cracked. This was obviously not a good sign. Sure enough, the next second a violent tremor struck. The bunker didn't hold on for long before it started to collapse. Countless people were crushed under the rubble. With the help of his friend, John successfully moved the concrete off his body, and then hurried to the conference room. He found his injured wife lying on the ground among the crowd. The two briefly assessed the surroundings, and decided to take their son and escape from the bunker. Luckily, they were lucky and found Nathan soon after. They hastily told their son to take all usable supplies, especially the life-saving protective masks and insulin. It turned out that Nathan had been suffering from diabetes all along. After the family of 3 put on their protective masks, they immediately headed for the bunker exit, but the west exit was blocked by the collapsed rubble. Relying on his familiarity with the bunker's structure, John immediately took his family to the east exit. Unluckily, the road to the east exit had also collapsed. They had to hunch over and struggle through the narrow cracks. When they reached the east exit, John told his wife and son to check their protective gear again, and only opened the blast door after confirming everything was fine. The second they rushed out of the blast door, the bunker collapsed with a loud crash, and those who failed to escape in time would probably never get out. But even though John and the others escaped the bunker, the situation was still not optimistic. The bunker was near a volcanic area, and the volcano could erupt at any time. But just then, Nathan suddenly disappeared. John and his wife scanned the surroundings and found that Nathan had gone to take care of the injured Amina. Amina was the doctor who had previously discovered through research that volcanoes could create safe zones. With the help of John and his wife, Nathan supported Amina and ran towards the seaside. They found that the people who had narrowly escaped were scrambling madly to board the lifeboats. At this point, the darkness of human nature was revealed in its entirety. The small boat was packed with desperate people, in a bid to fight for their own chance of survival. Some even pushed the people around them into the water, trying to drown them. Others snatched other people's protective masks. John and his wife couldn't stand by and stepped forward to help, but John's protective mask was snatched away. He ignored the radiation in the air, and boarded the last lifeboat with his wife and son. Seeing that the boat was almost full, the driver told his colleague to close the door, otherwise the boat would capsize due to being overloaded. The survivors were locked out and beat the hatch madly. Amid the roar of the engine, the lifeboat sailed away at high speed, and they finally escaped this dangerous place for the time being. But the people on the boat had no time to catch their breath, when a dark huge wave surged up on the sea, and swallowed everyone on the shore in an instant. The driver told everyone to hold on tight, and he used all his skills to keep the boat as steady as possible. The huge waves crashed against the hull relentlessly. Allison hugged her son and huddled in the corner of the cabin. Luckily, after a violent jolt, they finally escaped the threat of the huge waves. The sea gradually calmed down. The lifeboat continued to sail towards the unknown distance. John took out the radiation detector and found that the air quality at sea was good, and told everyone to take off their protective masks. Everyone then began to discuss where to go. The supplies on the boat were only enough for a week's consumption. For the time being, they had to go ashore to look for food. As soon as possible, someone suggested heading to the nearest Iceland, but everyone knew that place had long been completely destroyed due to ocean current changes. Europe seemed to be the only option. After thinking, John proposed sailing southeast, and they could reach England in about 5 days. Seeing no objection from anyone, the driver immediately changed course and headed southeast. The next day, the lifeboat's engine broke down due to disrepair and high-intensity operation. Luckily, with John, a professional repairman, the lifeboat was able to resume operation. That night, father and son John looked at the starry sky, as if they were in a fairy tale world. This was a long-awaited conversation between the father and son, but this beauty didn't last long. 3 days later, the lifeboat ran out of fuel. They could only resign themselves to fate now, letting the small boat drift aimlessly with the ocean current. In order to survive longer, everyone took out all the food and distributed it in strict rations. They had all been through such things, so they also gathered to chat to distract themselves, to prevent themselves from having a mental breakdown. After 2 days of difficult drifting, the small boat finally came to a stop. John opened the hatch at once to check.
It's the Liver building. We're in Liverpool.
John hastily took out the radiation detector, and found that the air radiation level here was relatively safe. He looked to the side and was surprised to find the lifeboat had stopped on the roof of a building. It turned out that all the buildings in this area had been submerged by seawater. John had no time to think too much. He needed to find a shelter as soon as possible. He hastily took the oars out of the cabin and rowed with his companions to propel the lifeboat. The driver steered the boat at the bow. After some effort, the lifeboat finally docked successfully. After getting everyone off the boat, John found that this area had been deserted for a long time. They had to find drinking water and food as soon as possible, and find a place to take shelter from the wind and rain. Allison suddenly remembered there was a shelter nearby, but they had never made contact with it before. Just as everyone was discussing what to do next, Nathan suddenly caught sight of a few people not far away, driven by curiosity. Everyone followed them quietly. Incredibly, a bustling market was hidden behind the desolate and silent streets. The people in the market looked calm and relaxed, as if they had long been used to living on the surface. John was filled with doubts. Had the environment here become sustainable for human daily life? But as they went deeper into the market, the cruel laws of survival behind the seemingly peaceful and stable scene gradually emerged. Several soldiers were guarding the gate of the shelter. A black officer repeatedly emphasized that anyone without a pass wasn't allowed to enter. Luckily, Allison had a pass with her, but the officer said one pass only allowed one person to enter. The bunker's supervisor and the others who came with them didn't have passes. Just as they were explaining to the guards, a riot suddenly broke out in the crowd. The soldiers immediately shot and killed the bunker's supervisor. The crowd fell silent in an instant. It was at this point that the alarm suddenly went off. Everyone looked up and saw a terrifying radiation storm quietly approaching. Watching the shelter's gate slam shut, John had to leave his companion's body there for the time being and flee here with his wife and son first. He hastily stopped a van and begged the driver to take them away. Upon learning that Allison was going to London, the driver pointed at John's watch. John immediately took off his watch and handed it to the driver. Only then did the driver agree and let them get in the car. Everyone escaped the radiation storm without incident. Allison immediately comforted her terrified son. The driver told everyone the world was too dangerous now. The radiation storms like the one just now often happen without warning and could kill a person in a few seconds. Even if someone escaped from it, they would slowly die from radiation. Luckily, the air here was pretty good, and there was no need to wear protective masks. John suddenly thought of his friend, Mackenzie, but it had been 9 months since their last call, and no one knew if Mackenzie was still alive. After several hours of long travel, everyone finally reached a wood on the outskirts of London. John took the initiative to approach the driver and ask him about the recent situation in Europe. The driver revealed that the situation in France was even more dangerous, and the volcanic safe zone mentioned by Dr. Amina also sounded very unreliable. As they spoke, Nathan walked over. Just as the father and son were about to return to the car, a low strange sound suddenly came from the distance. John immediately squatted down to feel the vibration from the ground. He looked up and saw that it was actually raining fire in the sky. John shielded his son in his arms and held onto the big tree tightly himself. Amina and Allison hurried to do the same, but the driver ran towards his beloved car, for the car was everything to him. The next second, the driver was hit by a meteorite, and his body was instantly vaporized by the high temperature. Before long, everything around finally calmed down, and the driver's car had been completely destroyed and scrapped. But John and the others had no time to mourn the driver. They went back to the damaged car and packed up all the usable supplies inside to take with them. Then they set off on foot towards the London urban area not far away, and finally reached Mackenzie's residence. Just as the sky was about to darken, John knocked on the door and was almost shot by Mackenzie. Mackenzie saw that it was John and quickly put down her gun to open the door. The reunion of old friends in the doomsday brought an indescribable joy to everyone's face. After a brief exchange of greetings, Mackenzie led them to a private room. The air here was far fresher than outside. It turned out that not long ago, she had managed to block off a section of the hospital and keep the generator running to power the air filtration system. Although the air quality wasn't as good as before the doomsday, it was enough to sustain them for a few more years. Just then, Amina noticed several gray-haired elderly people in the room and asked about them. Mackenzie admitted that these elderly people all suffered from Alzheimer's disease and didn't even know about the comet hitting the Earth. Mackenzie couldn't bear to drive the elderly away and thus took care of their daily lives. After the explanation, Mackenzie prepared a simple celebration to mark the long-awaited reunion with John's family. At first, everyone was very happy, but before long, they inevitably talked about the scene when the disaster just happened, and also the crater in France, which was the only hope for human survival. But Mackenzie didn't believe it at all. She hoped John's family would stay here, saying that this place was definitely safer than the outside, no matter what. Just then, gunshots and commotion were heard outside the house. which further confirmed what Mackenzie had said. In the dead of night, Allison had just fallen asleep. When she was woken up by a violent fit of coughing, she walked into the bathroom and found her husband wiping his mouth with a tissue, and the sink was full of blood. John lied and said he just had a nosebleed, but Allison saw through the clumsy lie at a glance. John had to admit that he only had 2 months left to live. Allison's eyes turned red in an instant. She said luckily they were in a hospital now, and could ask Mackenzie to find some medicine to cure John, but John said firmly that he wanted to take advantage of these 2 months to send his wife and son to the safe zone in southern France safely, no matter whether it was really safe there or not. Yet he still chose to hold on to hope, and after John's repeated insistence, Allison finally agreed to go to France with her husband. Early the next morning, Mackenzie gave her car to John. The fuel in the car was enough to take them to their destination. She handed over a pistol, roughly pointed out the direction, and then said goodbye to John's family. After a day of driving, John and the others were all a little tired. They decided to play a verbal game. But the next second, a bullet suddenly shot over and shattered the car window. Amina, who was the closest, was shot on the spot. John immediately got out of the car to fight back and engaged in a life and death struggle with the robbers on the opposite side. After a fierce gunfight, several robbers were successfully taken down. Nathan and Allison were unharmed, but Amina wasn't so lucky. Early the next morning, John found a quiet place to bury her. After a simple prayer, the three of them drove on. When they reached the English Channel, they were shocked by the sight in front of them. Countries had once fought countless wars to seize this place, but now the English Channel had completely dried up. Because of the doomsday, John had no time to sigh, and immediately drove onto the seabed. But they hadn't gone far when they saw more than a dozen cars parked ahead. John hastily got out of the car to check the situation, and found that the road ahead was blocked by a huge chasm. To move forward, they had to cross a crudely made bridge. After a brief observation, John decided to abandon the car, and took his wife and son to the rope bridge. Seeing that Nathan was very scared, John told him to pluck up his courage and follow him. After the family of three stepped onto the bridge, they grabbed the ropes on both sides with both hands. A bitter cold wind suddenly howled in, almost blowing the flimsy rope bridge over entirely. The three of them did their utmost to steady themselves, and finally crossed the rope bridge narrowly at the last minute. But the crisis wasn't over yet. There was also a suspended ladder bridge ahead of the rope bridge. The family of three hadn't yet mentally prepared themselves. When a violent earthquake suddenly struck, John knew well that this place wasn't safe to stay for long. He told his wife to cross the suspended ladder bridge as quickly as possible, but the ladder bridge was very unstable due to the earthquake and the cold wind. The family of three had just climbed to the middle of the ladder bridge when the rope bridge behind them suddenly broke. The other ladder bridge didn't hold on for long either. A survivor tried to jump onto the ladder bridge where John was, but failed and almost knocked Nathan off the bridge. John and his wife did their utmost to pull their son back onto the bridge and cross the ladder bridge at the fastest speed. By the skin of their teeth, they gasped for breath, all shaken by the terrifying scene they had just experienced. After calming down their emotions, the family of three walked on. They finally made their way to a crater, but there was no vibrant green in sight, only an endless stretch of pitch-black scorched earth. This even made the mentally strong John feel a little desperate. Luckily, with his wife by his side, he mustered up the courage to rethink what to do next. Just then, a gunshot suddenly broke the silence. Luckily, the man with the gun meant no harm. Upon learning that John's family was heading to France, the man Dance stepped forward, stretched out his hand in a friendly way, and invited John's family to get in his car. An hour later, Dance drove John's family to northern France and into a factory. Before the disaster, Jack ran a mail sorting center nearby. He was very handy with his hands. After the cataclysm, he transformed the mail sorting center with the available resources and built a fairly good stronghold. But his wife's nervous system was damaged by radiation, leaving her unable to speak or move ever since. During dinner, Dance talked about the volcanic crater John's family was heading to, saying no one knew if the rumors about that place were true or false, but he knew the area was far too dangerous. The Eastern Alliance wanted the resources of the crater, and the Western Alliance, along with the remnants of the French army, were fighting desperately to fend off the Eastern Alliance's invasion. To reach the crater, they couldn't avoid the front line where the fighting was taking place. John's time was running out. He had to take the risk. The next day, after thinking all night, Dance took out a map, on which the troop deployments of the Eastern and Western Alliances were marked, as well as the only hidden path that led around to the volcanic crater. Although this path could bypass the war-torn front line, it still passed through a combat zone. Moreover, the path was sandwiched between several mountains, making it very difficult to traverse, and it was guarded by the troops of the Western Alliance. Luckily, the commander guarding the road was Peter, Dance's friend. With that, Dance took out a group photo of himself and his friend, telling John to hand the photo to Peter when he met him, and Peter would definitely let them pass, but Dance had one condition. He hoped John would take his daughter Lena away with him. In fact, Dance had long had this idea. He knew well that staying in this place now was the same as waiting for death, but he couldn't take his immobile wife to the crater, so he took the initiative to rescue people coming to France, just to find someone who could take his daughter to the crater.
I have yet to meet anyone else I would trust with this. I beg of you, John.
Just as John hesitated, Allison walked over slowly, and firmly promised they would take Lena to the crater safely. Everything was ready. Lena said goodbye to her mother, hugged Dance tightly, and then set off with John at once. Allison sat in the passenger seat checking the map. While John's cough grew more and more severe, they had to stop the car to rest on the way. But just then, the roar of a car suddenly came from not far away. John and the others had no time to run away. After the soldiers in the car surrounded them, the leading soldier told John in French that civilians weren't allowed to cross this area. After confirming the soldiers were from the Western Alliance, Lena immediately stood up, saying her father was a friend of Commander Peter. The soldier Riley immediately had someone contact the commander to confirm. After getting a definite reply, he led the four of them to the combat zone. This was the only way to the command post. The combat zone was filled with flying artillery fire. A single misstep would lead to being shot dead. Riley told John and the others to stay close to him and follow his orders without fail. Everyone set off at once after getting ready. Bullets whistled past their ears. Wails of agony rang out endlessly. Luckily, John and the others were lucky, and finally crossed the combat zone without a single person being injured. Riley told John that walking straight along the forest would lead them to the command post, and that they would have to fend for themselves for the rest of the journey. After leaving the combat zone, John and the others continued forward according to the directions. After a night of arduous trekking, the four of them finally reached the command post. Early the next morning, they were already not far from the crater. The outside of the command post was packed with refugees, struggling to survive. Lena used her French to ask for the location of the commander's tent. John immediately took the photo and asked an officer where Peter was, only to be told that Peter had died from severe injuries. The only way to get to the crater now was to take the coach in the camp. John and the others would have to wait 3 days to get a spot, but no one knew what changes might happen in those 3 days. John hurried over to the officer and begged him to let his group pass.
I'm dying. I don't have much longer, and I promised my family that I'll get them to safety.
In the end, the officer was persuaded by John and the others were able to board the coach. They thought no more troubles would come their way, but shortly after the coach set off, a group of rebels suddenly attacked it. The soldiers on the coach got off at once to fight back, and a fierce gunfight broke out between the two sides immediately. After the rebels took down the soldiers, they immediately drove everyone off the coach. John knew well that if he missed this chance, he might never be able to take his wife and son to the crater, so John suddenly grappled with a rebel when the latter was distracted. The refugees outside the coach swarmed forward, and together they took down the remaining 2 rebels, but unluckily, John was shot in the abdomen during the scuffle. Even so, he gritted his teeth and persevered. The coach mustn't turn back now. Allison immediately took the wheel and drove the coach towards the crater, but just as they were about to reach their destination, a broken-down car blocked the road ahead. Everyone had to get off and walk forward, supporting each other. More than 10 minutes later, they climbed over the mountain and arrived beside the crater. The crater was full of vitality. As long as humans made good use of it, they could survive and rebuild civilization. Allison told John that if he recuperated here, his radiation sickness would surely get better. But John didn't reply, only kissing his son on the forehead, staring at the unrealistically beautiful scenery in front of him. John could no longer hold on and collapsed. Allison held her husband tightly in her arms, feeling his body temperature fade away little by little, while the flowers beside them swayed in the wind. The movie ended with John's memories. Greenland Migration is a newly released film. It continues the plot of the first film, and doesn't take the disaster as the only main part. Instead, it turns the camera on ordinary people struggling between bunkers and ruins, making the doomsday a touchstone for testing human nature. Although the plot seems cliched, it's fairly smooth on the whole. It's a barely qualified disaster movie. If you like my channel, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe.